A very warm welcome to our ninth TravMedia at Home webinar series. This time with a couple of my great friends who I've known for an extremely long time. I think we started TravMedia when I met Stephen, and of course I've got to know everybody else very well. Peter Needham and I go back, goodness me knows how long, back to when I was a journo. I think when I first came up with TravMedia, Peter and I had lunch, goodness me,
Yeah.
what, 22 years ago or 21 years ago?
I'm surprised you can remember it, you know.
Yeah.
A very long time. So today it's just all about a casual conversation with these guys about what's happening in the world, what's happening for their publication. We've got Stephen Morton here, we've got Peter Needham, we've got John Allen Jones, and we've got Ed Young. Welcome to you all, and a special welcome to the 100 or so people that have logged on to today's webinar. Thank you for finding the time to join us today, and we're really looking forward to having this webinar series. So could I start off by asking each of you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Stephen, are you going to go first? You're the boss.
Yeah.
All right, I'll go first. I'll tell you what. Yeah, John Alwyn Jones. I've been around forever. I'm nearly as old as Nick, but not as old as Peter Needham, so that's good. And I wasn't at the lunch when huge amounts of alcohol were drunk when Peter and Nick got together. But my background is from Wales in the UK originally, and worked in the US and worked in Australia, moved to Australia, marketing Britain here and stuff like that. And then management consulting, went into media, used to own Travel Mole in Australia here. And then latterly over the last several years, really been working with Stephen Morton on global travel media and doing a whole heap of other things. And we'll talk about the new global travel media and how things are moving ahead to reflect the current marketplace as we move forward. And I'll introduce now Ed Young, who's our new partnership and sales manager, with partnership being the important word, Ed, is that right?
That is correct, John. Thank you very much for the welcome, guys. I'm actually new to global travel media. My background is predominantly in aviation, defence, mining, etc. And I've dealt with a lot of major clients around the world, all across the globe. I've had sales with obviously aerospace industry, defence, mining, etc. But media is new to me, but work with me, and I'm happy to do what I can. But the key thing with me is to build relationships and partnerships. So with the partnerships, it's a new term that we're looking at to try and create those long-term relationships with you guys and our clientele, the PR such as yourself and other people in the industry. So new to me, but work with me, and I'm happy to help wherever we can.
Well, great. We'll get into those questions in a few minutes' time to talk about commercial relationships and our partnerships. Peter Needham, give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself.
Yeah, well, I've been in journalism for many years. I was originally I'm from New Zealand, and I came to Australia and worked for Cumberland newspapers. Then I went to South America. Then I was in the UK for 8 years, and I worked for The Guardian, the Washington Post, Los Angeles Times news syndicate, and then a company we did a lot of stuff for Braniff Airlines of Texas and also Norwegian Caribbean Lines. So that was in, then I worked for Reuters in the UK, came back to Australia about in the early 80s, worked for AAP for a while, and then I worked for Travel Trade briefly, and then I was editor of Inside Tourism for 8 years. And then I've been freelancing since and working for a global association with eGlobal, and that's about it.
Fantastic. And last but not least, we lost you there for a minute, Stephen. We were going to start off with you, but give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself and why you're here.
Well, hi guys, hi everybody. I've been around in this business for a little bit, and the last 10, 11 years I've been living over in Thailand and running the company from over there, and made lots of contacts over there, and which has led us to the next stage of our development here in Australia. And unfortunately, I had to relocate back from Thailand to Australia due to medical conditions that I've got. And hopefully this year 2021 is going to be a great year for us and for all of us, and for me in particular. And I'm looking forward to working with you, and I will highlight some of the developments that we're putting in place in the next session.
Fantastic. And if I'm right, John, you're in Queensland. Stephen, you're in Queensland. Ed, where are you based?
Yeah, I'm in Brisbane as well.
And
Yeah.
Peter, you're
Take over.
I'm
in Sydney.
New South Wales South Coast.
So my first question is to you, Stephen. Can you tell us a little bit of the history about the global travel media? Where did it come from and how did it start? Stephen?
Stephen Frozen.
I think it might be.
I think we might have a technical glitch. Can you hear us, Stephen? We'll give it a few more seconds.
Yeah. Well,
All
while we're waiting, I can probably sort of kick in just to see until Stephen comes. Well, many of you will recognise Stephen and Peter at the time as well as with eTravel Blackboard, which Stephen was instrumental in running for many, many years. He's very well known. Oh, here's Stephen back now. Here we go. You there, Stephen?
Sorry, Zoom keeps on dropping out.
No worries. But one quick question for you was, can you tell us a little bit of the history of the global travel media? Where did it come from? How did the idea eventuate? Can you give us a little bit of the history?
Okay, well, we started it in 2010, I think it was, or 2009, one of the two. Where previously, before that, I was working with eTravel Blackboard and agent support systems for about 20 years. And when I finished up with eTravel Blackboard, I decided I should do something for myself and be my own boss, and hence Global Travel Media was evolved and started. The only problem was it was much cheaper to employ people in overseas countries than in Australia. So, and having a lot of the development work was done in Asia because it was very, very cost effective to make things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And hence some of our new developments are all going to be done over in Asia as well.
Excellent. So my next question is for Peter Needham. Peter, I imagine you're doing most of the writing. What changes have been made since the start of COVID, and where do you see the publication going from here?
Yeah, well, COVID's had a big effect on everything, I suppose, but you know, the resilience of the industry in the face of that is quite inspiring, really. And everyone's pushing now, obviously, for an extension of job support. JobKeeper. And but yeah, I mean, you know, it's holding up, and I suppose there's a lot of huge pent-up demand. I mean, that's the encouraging thing, is that there is massive pent-up demand for travel, and you can see this as soon as the borders open. There is massive bookings, people trying to, you know, but when the borders close arbitrarily, then this tends to burn the punters, so to speak, you know, when they, you know, they're a little bit wary about that. So, but the demand is there, and companies are hanging in for when the borders finally open up, both internationally and the state borders.
Yeah,
I think the state borders are more or less open now, really.
I know that connect well, yes, and I can't wait for the international borders to open up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't we all? So what are your biggest challenges right now, Peter?
For me, well, just the usual garnering through the various news and sorting out what's important and what's less important, and finding the most, you know, the most gripping and stories which you know, affect the industry, affect people's livelihood, and also that which are interesting, and the occasional one which is just sort of spectacularly weird, or you know, so unusual that people will read it because it's bizarre. But you know, there's not so many of those. You know, mainly it's news.
Fantastic. So Ed, I've got a note here for you to chime in on that question as well. What are your biggest challenges right now?
My biggest challenges is working with the clientele. Obviously, COVID's had a big impact on budgets, and that's understandable. So, and we can talk about that a bit later. But as you said, it's key to have the information out there and developing packages. People want to travel, they can't travel, but they want to know what's happening around the world still. So we're working on doing a few different bits and pieces which are going to be able to assist in that. So keeping the news out there, what's going on, and so those that are keen to travel are up to date when the time comes, so that they can actually board an aircraft and go somewhere.
Excellent. So, John, my next question is for you. How are you approaching cruise aviation and international stories right now?
Well, I think, I suppose the world has changed. I mean, technology has changed so much. So all of a sudden, instead of producing articles, and Peter, and I write quite a lot of articles as well. And we have a group, a phalanx, I love the word phalanx, of about 10 contributors that write from time to time. But it's important now that we take into account things like Google, tags, all the stuff that makes people read things. Cruising is a really interesting space at this point in time. I mean, there's no question at all cruising will come back. Some of the cruise companies in Australia are very reticent to talk about this, okay? I've got to say Carnival's been good recently, NCL probably a bit less good in talking with us, but look, that's their right. They have a right to do that. Cruising will come back. The pent-up demand is massive, and the forward bookings are massive at this point in time. Aviation, I think it's unfortunate that Alan Joyce, for example, made his announcement about stopping international travel for July. But, at the end of the day, he's been proved to be right. But other airlines like Emirates, Qatar, Singapore Airlines, Cathay, and so on have been flying into Australia and doing a brilliant job. So, it's a very complex space at this time. And where we fit into that is that we're trying to restructure, I suppose, global travel media to becoming more technology focused so we can actually deliver messages to our subscribers that better inform them. And we sit now across, and Stephen can talk about this, we sit now across both consumers and trade. So we get a heck of a lot of people now accessing global travel media who are consumers, and they do that through search, okay? Masses through search. But we want to be in a position to provide people with accurate, quality information for them to help make their travel decisions, either as a travel agent or either as a consumer. And we're working with some of the home-based agencies like Travel Managers at the moment to get their message out about the new world for travel agents. I mean, the travel agency community is decimated. There's no question at all about it. The model doesn't exist anymore, although Screw Turner will probably tell us it did. It does. But, home-based travel agents are the thing for the future, and travel agents becoming travel advisors and travel consultants and specialists and providing those specialist skills. And those are the messages Peter, myself, and all our contributors want to get across to the industry. And to do that, we've restructured the organization as well. Hence, Ed being on board here as our partnership manager to drive these really vitally important partnerships with PR media companies and also with sales and marketing companies. I'll stop now, Ed.
All right. Just before you go on, Ed, John, you mentioned that you've got consumers now, because I always thought of you as an industry publication.
Yeah.
Do you know what the breakup of international as opposed to domestic audience is?
Well, Stephen's the one to answer that, but the consumer and trade thing, some side of it, is not something we can control, because the internet now controls everything. Okay, so you go onto Google or whatever, and we know what's happening with Google at the moment in Australia. Google won't pull out of Australia. They will resolve the situation just as it happened in France. But what happens is, of course, you put a search in holiday in France, okay? And if we're good at what we do, then the articles that we have should come high up in the search, and therefore people will look at it whether they're consumers or trade. But Stephen, can you give a breakdown in terms of that international versus Australia? We're still predominantly Australian though, aren't we?
Still predominantly Australian. Probably around 45% of our traffic comes from Australia, and 55% is international. And just as oh, by the way, in the last 7 days, we've had 6.3 million visitors, page visits to our website.
Yeah, 6.3 million. That's a heck of a lot.
Yeah. No,
And the average time they spend on our sites 1 hour and 33 minutes.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So next question for you, Peter. What feedback are you hearing from your readers? What content is getting the most traction from your audience?
Well, it depends, but basically anything airline developments. Things like Emirates suddenly ceasing to serve Australia and then resuming serving Australia. That sort of thing obviously affects an awful lot of people. Anything like that. News is one of the main drivers of really of any sort. I mean, obviously travel agent either material or things which affect the industry, such as the agents, that has a big effect as well. Governmental moves to which affect agents, that's a driver.
Can I make a comment there for a second, Nick? And that comment that Peter made is really important. We encourage the PRs and the people in the media world to think about what they're sending people like Peter and us. It needs to be exciting, dynamic, and it needs to be news. Pedestrian stuff, we have to make decisions at the end of the day. We have 6 or 7 headline news sections, and we have to make a decision about what goes in those. And it's quite challenging sometimes. And some of the stuff, quite honestly, is pretty boring stuff. And it's also very sales and promotion orientated, and it doesn't make the cut. But sensational news or good news that the PR people have really worked and thought about, that's what Peter and Stephen and myself to an extent will decide what goes in. Correct, guys?
Yeah.
Correct.
If I
Well,
could,
let's hope that our audience is sending you some good news as opposed to dull and boring. But anyway, I'll certainly argue on behalf of everybody that we're sending you as much interesting news, educational and informative. But look, my next question, I guess, is to you, Stephen. As the travel bubbles that look like they're opening up in between us and New Zealand or Singapore over the next couple of months, or at least be the first destinations to have flights in and out of Australia, certainly the Pacific, how are you navigating around this?
How are we going to navigate around it? Oh, well, it's going to be very interesting because I think initially it's going to take a little bit of time for it to all open up properly, because you listen to a lot of these airlines, unless people have had the vaccine, they're not going to be allowed to hop on a plane. So that's going to be the first thing. So here in Australia, we're going to roll it out next month, which is starting on Monday, I believe, sometime next month. So Australia's in a very lucky position where we're right. I'm just lucky. I'm just glad we're not in the States or in Europe at the moment, because those areas are. And I was just talking to one of my colleagues in San Francisco this morning, and he said it's one of the worst things he could ever put up with, and see what's happening in the States.
Oh, the States and Europe are decimated.
And yes.
Just absolutely. Stephen,
Yes.
just grab your screen a little bit. We've just got again. We've only cutting.
That's it. Yeah, we can see your chin now. Yeah.
Good. Well, listen. Whilst I've got you,
So I keep moving.
we briefly spoke about, and this is really important for everybody. Your numbers, your circulation, your distribution. Are you still doing print, or are you predominantly online?
We're only online. I've always only been online.
Okay.
And we email out every day about 70,000 emails a day.
It's a massive
And
database.
which evaluates why we're getting so many page views on the website. And let me just go back to what Peter was saying before. The news, if there's anything that's a bad disaster, it's the first thing anybody reads.
This is true.
So
human nature, an unfortunate side of human nature. Yeah.
Yes. So whenever Peter's written a story and it's a disaster story, it's already up in the thousands of views within the first hour of it going online in the morning.
Fantastic.
Now, I go back to with what John and you were saying, Nick, and Peter were saying before. Overnight, I get about 4,000 emails of press releases, and out of that, about 50 make it onto our website.
Okay, that's a lot of emails
So
every day.
it's a lot of emails to go through.
I mean, Nick, there's so many people churning out so much data, and the sorting it out and weeding out the good, the bad, and the ugly is a real challenge for us. And those that are creative and think about what they're doing, and also Ed's position is really important in this, who builds a relationship with us. It's no good just sending us releases and, yeah, we know you in the distance and stuff like that. Talk to Ed, have a chat with him, sort out your relationship with us, tell us what your objectives are, who your clients are, and it makes life easier for us. And Nick, we're very lucky that we've got you in the marketplace here, because you've got clients as well, and you push, no bullshit. You have lots of really good material on your TravMedia site as well. But we want to build relationships with the individual operators the way we have a relationship with
John,
you.
John, thank you very much for the plug. I really appreciate it. It's a good segue actually to talk to you, Ed. Are there any destinations that have collaborated with you recently? Any that you would like to talk about that have been a success story?
At the moment, we're developing some new products there, and destination wise, obviously the travel bubble's been a bit difficult for us. But since I've been here, we're currently working on the Brisbane, Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast area. So that's our key target market at the moment. There is a push into New South Wales and interest from some of the other states as well. It comes down to borders and availability to travel, etc. as well. So Destination Australia, as you've all seen everywhere you look at the moment, they're pushing it hard. So we're working in conjunction with the RTOs and other key people within the industry as well with regards to getting that message out there as well. And also, small business which needs the income in regional areas is key for their economies to survive through this as well. So that's what we're working at. But predominantly at the moment, we're Queensland orientated just due to travel restrictions. But we are looking elsewhere at the moment and open to opportunities.
And can you talk about any particular commercial opportunities that are available with you guys?
Look, let me just jump in for a second there. One of the things that we're looking at doing at the moment, we're going to do some more of these type of webinars, but we're also concentrating on other things that people like to know about, which is cooking. So we've spoken to some Michelin chefs in America and in Asia. So we're going to have some Michelin style chefs coming on with us in the future to talk about how to prepare certain food types, which is going to be very good.
Very interesting. So I know, John, you had a very successful cruise industry webinar a few months back that I thought was very successful. You managed to get all the movers and shakers of the industry on your webinar. Hats off to you. I think phenomenal effort to get so many great names behind it. Are you going to roll those sorts of webinars out more frequently?
Yeah, look, I think what we're working on at the moment, I mean, it was very challenging. And I mean, the aviation one, for example, it was practically impossible to get the senior guys, although I know Paul very well, who was a CEO of Virgin, they were all so careful about what they wanted to say. And it's the same with the cruise companies. We had so many cruise companies on board, but the really big ones were really protective, all scared, they might be caught out, sort of thing. So we're going to roll out, yes, more webinars on separate topics rather than industry on topics. I think that's the way we're going to go. We're also going to launch, or we're in the process of working at the moment on a weekly news podcast. And that'll come out, we anticipate at the moment, possibly, we haven't quite finalized yet, every Monday. And each of our contributors will contribute a very short news stab to that, which is hot news. So it's developing that whole hot news scenario that Peter was talking about. And that'll be broadcast on Global Travel Media. And then Ed was talking about the regional stuff we're doing. They're on location programs, a bit like the programs we used to do before from Fiji and Vanuatu and stuff, interviewing hoteliers and doing reviews of hotels and tourist attractions and so on, and broadcasting those. So what we've done with the company is look strategically at the industry and said, okay, where needs help at this point in time? And who needs to get their message out there? How can we do that? But at the end of the day as well, how can we make a living out of it too? Because that's quite important, because we have bills to pay. Stephen wants to maintain his lifestyle of the rich and famous in Queensland, so which would be nice. But no, it's complex.
So do you have a schedule of webinars that you might be rolling out over the next couple of months? And if I was listening in on this call, how can I get involved if I wanted to have my CEO on that particular webinar?
But we're ready to listen to anybody at this point in time. It's very simple. Edward at egtmedia.com is Ed. He's the partnership manager. Contact Edward. Whatever thoughts anybody's got about what they'd like to do, have a chat. You can access our 68,000 people, who are all desperate to do something with you. And Ed's the man, whether it be on location, whether it's webinars, whether it's our podcasts that will be going out, you name it. And I think that there's been a dominance in the market with some players in this news space. And I think one message, and I know I talk way too much, but one message that Stephen has come out with today very clearly is we are a big player. we're a big player and we're getting massive views and accesses. We've got a highly professional team and Peter leading our editorial team as well. So Ed's the man.
So let's talk about the editorial. What sort of stories are you looking to receive from PRs?
Peter, do you want to talk about that, or do you want me to?
Well, as basically one of the oldest things they say in news, and it applies in travel just as much as anywhere else, is that news has to be new. In other words, it has to be something that's happened very recently. One thing, I mean, if somebody sends you a release or something like that, you can assume that that is current because it's been sent to you. But if you're, say, on a site, either a social media site or a corporate site, something like that, there can be various news developments there, but they're not necessarily dated. So one of the most important things is to put a date on any release that you send out. It's very simple, but that immediately says when it was released and where it is, because otherwise nobody wants to run something and then find, hey, this was 6 weeks old, right? You know, so that's something to remember anyway.
And fair enough. And now, if I was a freelancer and I had a particular story that I thought was worth running with you, Peter, what would be, first of all, are you accepting freelance pitches?
Yeah, we do. I mean, I don't specifically go through those, but we certainly do accept freelance submissions. I don't think at the moment we pay for them, but we can, you know, if somebody wants to get a run, yeah.
Okay.
So,
and if so, what's the best way to approach you?
Just to email it in is probably the best way. Just to send an email, you know, to and that's the best thing. And then Stephen and I would, and John, whatever, would work it out from there.
And let's just make a comment on you're saying about PR companies. A couple of pointers. Please don't send PDFs and complicated things where you've spent a week sort of putting little boxes in and pictures and stuff that we have to then sort out, because our attention span is fairly limited when we're going through these the thousands of emails we get every day. And please don't put on the bottom, if you'd like images, please contact whatever, or access a highly complicated website to dig out the images, because we won't bother. It's too hard. You know, we have a very limited time before our deadline when we've got to get stuff sorted and in there. We'll put it to one side and it might not reappear because another 4,000 media releases appear the next day. Is that a fair comment, Peter?
Yeah, that sounds
okay.
Very, very reasonable. Yeah, from my...
And I'll jump in there as well, because I see all that stuff, and anybody that sends an email through that's got a PDF on it, it's deleted straight away.
Yes, and you know, voluminous attachments, you know, of any, you know, JPEGs, whatever. They're okay up to a point, but you don't want huge.
The important thing is we don't need images that are 25 meg.
No.
Deep or 3 gigabyte. Deep.
What is your preferred format then?
HTML format, Word document, and images attached, low res images, because that's what the internet needs, is low res anyway.
And I assume JPEGs?
Yeah.
JPEGs, yes, JPEGs.
Yeah.
Or anything similar like that.
They just need to be low res, because for the internet, as Stephen says, we don't need high res images. Simple as that. And just one other message as well. Try, as I said before, the PRs and the media, I'm not teaching grammar to suck eggs, but when you think about a story, think about the people are going to read it. If it's a straightforward sales pitch, it's unlikely to make it. If it's a creative article about wonderful cruises in the Mediterranean, sailing from the Greek islands, what an amazing ship. Oh, and by the way, we've got a special deal running at the moment. That's more likely to make it.
Yeah, interesting. So we've briefly spoken about how to get through to you guys. I think that's been very clear. What ratio have you got between international and domestic stories at the moment? Is everything about the drive market, since we're not really flying interstate, or there are not many flights open? Certainly internationals off the books. You're still interested in receiving those sorts of stories? Are you still writing about them?
Yes, we're still doing stories over international stories plus domestic stories, because people who are reading, they want to know about what's still happening in New Zealand. They still want to know what's happening in Japan or China or America and places like that. So they may not, they can't get there now, but they'll file it away and then keep it for another day.
Excellent. I forgot to mention at the beginning of this webinar, but now that I know that everybody's online, if you have any questions for the team, feel free to go down the bottom of the Zoom box and just click on the Q&A button and write any questions, and I'll read them out to the team. Excellent. So, are you accepting any domestic famil opportunities? Are you traveling? Are you, obviously internationals off the cards? Where's your next trip?
Carry on, Stephen.
Okay, well, since COVID's been around, I haven't seen very much coming through the door, and I can honestly say, coming back to Australia as opposed to living in Thailand, where when I was in Thailand, I was every week I was traveling somewhere, because it's just over there. There was just so many different famils happening over there in Asia, whereas here in Australia, I don't know what it is here in Australia, but the Australian PRs in some aspect a little bit lax when it comes to that.
Well, that's probably because they thought you were based internationally, and now that you're back here, might be an opportunity to work closely with you. But I mean, I'm sure, Peter, you're of course very well known, and if anyone was going to take you on a trip, so anyone was going to take anyone on a trip, it'd certainly be you. Are you taking any famils or any opportunities to travel?
Not a lot at the moment. I mean, I've travelled. There's an awful lot of a lot of desire to travel to regional destinations and so forth. That's absolutely huge. I mean, like motels and all of that, heavily booked just from people within the same state and that sort of thing. But I haven't done any travel for a while. Apart from holidays to the Blue Mountains and that sort of stuff. So I think the state border closures are inhibiting for a lot of people, because you think, well, if you go somewhere and they close the border, then you've got a bit of a problem.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, just commenting for a second. Ed's on location program, that's what that's all about in a sense, okay? Because, for example, on location from the Gold Coast would be a series of reviews of hotels and tourist attractions from that location, okay? So it's a sort of combination and a slightly more commercial version of that, of a familial type scenario, but only us, not other people.
Fantastic. All right, great, guys. So if I was to ask you one final question, and that would be, if there was a takeaway from today's webinar, what would it be? Let's start with you, Stephen.
I think communicate with us more, tell us what you need, and keep the communication lines very, very much open, because I'm available basically nearly 24 hours a day. I'm online or on phone, so I'm around for anybody to contact at any time.
Great. John, what would your takeaway be from today's webinar?
Pretty similar, really, but also that Global Travel Media is a serious player in the marketplace. And it's a bit like as if we're always trying to tell people that, whereas, we're receptive and we're happy to receive ideas, communication, promotional activity. We've restructured the business. So from a strategic perspective, we will be broadcasting a sort of diary, if you like, of destinations and places we'd like to work in. So I think it's the communication side of things. And very often you get the feeling with media and PR companies that it's, I don't mean this quite the way it sounds, all about them, and we just happen to be a convenient sort of outlet for them. It's not really like that. What it's like is we want to work with you, have a strategic discussion about what your objectives are, and see how we can actually deliver those for you. And that's what Ed's job is in that partnership space. And talk to us, and don't just assume sending emails to us with press releases that the vast majority of which are not up to par, are going to create a relationship with us. Pick up the phone.
Yeah, no, I can't echo that more importantly. I mean, communication face-to-face or on the telephone is just so much more personal than email, isn't it? So
yeah, and I mean, we are in Queensland, so that probably doesn't help a lot of people because they think Queensland is probably off Papua New Guinea somewhere.
I wouldn't agree with that one. That's definitely not the case. We have a lot of people that have logged in from Queensland. So.
No, and I think that's great. The issue is that the industry itself tends to be Sydney-centric a little bit, okay? And I know that Ed and I have discussed this, and Stephen and I have discussed it. So just remember, Queensland is booming. A lot of people working up here. A lot of people in the travel industry. You know, we're a big player now in terms of that. So just talk to us. Pick up the phone. If we can't pop down for a coffee, which we probably can't at this point in time, just have a chat with us. Easy.
Terrific. Peter, I'm going to give you the final word. What's your one takeaway from today's webinar?
Well, it's you know, good to discuss, and you know, and it's yeah, I think you know, communication should, you know, the more open they are, the better, and you know, keep the stories coming in, and you know, there's a lot of interesting ones among them, and we'll sort them out. But yeah, I mean, obviously, communication is everything.
Well, listen, I miss you, all of you, desperately, not seeing you face to face. I certainly hope that as soon as the borders open, well, the borders are open, aren't they? But as soon as you can travel down to Sydney, we'd love to see you. I hope you all stay safe and well. And we're very lucky to be in this country where we're not going through a pandemic like the rest of the world, aren't we?
Yeah, hugely so.
So, you know, I don't think I've seen so many people at the beaches yesterday in Sydney as the hottest day ever.
Same here.
Happy Australia Day. Well, guys, listen, do stay in touch. I'm, as I said, looking forward to seeing you all in person. And thank you very much for joining today's webinar and telling us all about yourselves.
Thanks, Nick.
Stay well.
Okay, thanks, Nick.
Stay
Bye
well.
now.
Cheers, bye. Cheers, guys. Bye.
Okay.